Where will the final home be for Lemon and Lady? And so
That's a very good question. I think that will depend a lot on all the other puppeteers. We have government, obviously, with the stake in this. We have the university, we have the public. Obviously, for me personally, I would like the material to be available for people to see, because I think it's really important for people to actually see the physical material, not just casts. Casts are cool too, but it's sort of like zoos. It's a different thing to see a real tiger up front and recognize that maybe there are conservation issues around that animal than to just read about it. So I would like to see public display for sure, but that is often in conflict with research access. Obviously we can't have researchers, you know, running amok with the material and have the public see it as well. So I don't know. That's
too early to tell.
But I don't have the answer at this point.
Okay.
How would they know that that bone is for that person?
Well, that's also an excellent question. So the material that we excavated was actually very jumbled. We call that commingled. So one individual died and their body disarticulated, as happens in nature, and you see that on the roads, unfortunately, with roadkill and stuff. Another body would come in and get sort of mixed up with that body. So we can't always tell whether, you know, one leg matches this arm, but what we can do is look at the ages. So if we have, you know, a femur from a little tiny baby, and we get another femur also from a little tiny baby, and one's left and one's right, chances are that it's probably a single individual rather than two individuals of exact same age that happen to have one leg or the other. It's possible that it's two individuals, and we try to accommodate that in our understanding of it. But at this point, that's why we say we have at least 15 individuals at this point, and most of that is based on dental information. So we have sets of teeth that we can say, okay, we have 5 left canines. Well, at the bare minimum, we have 5 individuals there. If we have 5 left canines and 2 right canines, and it could be 7 individuals, but at a bare minimum, it's still 5.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, this excavation, I mean, when they say burial, I think most people have in their heads a nice sort of neat row of burials, you know, literally like a graveyard. And that's not the case here. They weren't laying them out nicely and covering them up, and we have no evidence of tools, we have no evidence of fire, we have no evidence that they were living in these places. So all we really have is sort of a jumble of bones, more like, I guess, in a contemporary example would be like a mass grave, where a number of people got sort of pushed into a larger hole and then their bodies decomposed.
Is it generally thought of that people at that time did stay in one area, that you could throw generations of people in one grave?
You know, that's,
It depends.
yeah, again, that's very fluid. One of the excavations that I worked on a number of years ago was in northern Siberia, and that was a nomadic population. So they were doing a seasonal round, essentially. In the summer they would be in certain areas, in the winter they would move south, obviously, because Siberia is intensely inhospitable in the winter. So they did these seasonal rounds, but if someone happened to die out in one of the areas that they didn't normally have, what they would do is on the next seasonal round, they would pick up the bones and bring them back. So that is a possibility. Strikes me as unlikely, but what's possible for, you know, one hypothesis for the Mileti material is that they were living in and around the cradle area, and they were just moving wherever they needed to. Wildlife was abundant here, you know, plant life was abundant here, so they may not have had to wander terribly far, in which case, when and if another member of their community died, it wouldn't be a train smash to bring them to this site. And it's possible that there are multiple areas where they deposited material. I mean, the cradle is riddled with caves, and we've only barely scratched the surface of investigating them. So.
Fantastic. It really sounds so exciting to be in.
You know,
this
it's a pretty good job.
Yeah.
I have to say, as far as combining, you know, things that are a lot of fun. I mean, the caving and the climbing and all that kind of stuff. The field work, if you like to get dirty, is a lot of fun. And for those of us that like to get dirty, it's pretty cool. But then for me, I'm very, very lucky. I've been able to both do the field work and move into the lab and do the research and publication and that kind of things. So for me, it's a perfect mesh of both. I get to play in the dirt, and then I also get to play with the bones in the lab, and then as it turns out, I get lots and lots of time to spend to talk to people about it. So yeah, that's actually cool too. I mean, I really think that's important.
Yeah.
Just because we've heard a lot today of sitting behind a computer all day long. So like out of a year, how much would you say percentage-wise you're in the field?
Yeah, actually, since I've been here, I've been trying to actually do 2 days a week in the field. And that is one real luxury of being in South Africa as opposed to somewhere like Canada. Canada, as you can imagine, has a very short field season, since we have like 8 months of winter. So here, it's actually, we're very, very lucky. I can excavate any time I like. And that's the other bonus, I guess, of being underground, is that I don't care whether it's a summer storm or it's lightning and thunder and carrying on. I'm in a constant 18 degrees centigrade environment. Okay, it's 99% humidity, but you know, I can excavate all year round, and that's awesome. So yeah, I try to spend a lot of time in the field. The last month or 2, not so much because of all these other all these other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's.
And then in the lab, like you're actually working with the bones, you're dating them.
Yeah, I mean,
putting them together.
because I sort of, in many cases I'm a one-man band with some of this stuff. I go through all the dirt. I do the sediment processing. I'll do the cleaning of the bones. I'll do the refitting if necessary. Some of the reconstruction work. Getting all that prepped. I mean, you know, everything to cutting out little holes in foam. I mean, I spend a couple days a week at my desk doing research and whatnot. There's obviously with universities lots of administration duties, and then lab work is always part of everything.
And do you by any chance know how old these fossils are?
We don't yet. That's been one of those top questions that everybody's asked us. Dating in South Africa is very difficult. We don't have the same geology as East Africa to be able to date things using volcanic layers. Obviously inside caves, again, it's even more complicated because you've got a lot of movement and shifting around. We tried a couple of techniques, things like uranium lead dating, radiocarbon dating, if you know that one, is likely to be too old. Our material is likely to be too old for that. It has a cutoff around 50,000 years. We're going to try it anyway, just because why not? We have the material to do it, and there's no reason not to. So we will be trying radiocarbon dating, but the other methods that are sort of normally used in these areas haven't worked for us, partly because we don't have volcanic material, partly because we're having difficulty right inside the chamber where we are. We have the normal uranium lead dating has contamination issues, so we're getting very different signals from different areas. So until we figure out that a little bit better, we've held off on dates. And so, you know, I know everyone's anxious for a date, and we are too. And we're trying our hardest, and we'll just keep trying different techniques until we get at least more than one that has the same answer. I mean, that's really what we want to do. We don't want to take one date and say, oh, well, that's it. That's the one we're going to go with, because we need to corroborate that with another technique to make sure that we're right. And we didn't want to put out a date erroneously and then have to retract it afterwards, as often happens in anthropology. People come up with a date initially and then backtrack and then track again. And I mean, Mrs. Plez is an awesome, Littlefoot is an awesome example of that in the recent past, is that they've sort of gone from dates from 3.5, 4 million to 2 million, and they go back and forth. And it's complicated stuff, so we're gonna try, but at this point we don't have a good
Good question. How do you scan the bones? What do you use? Because it's
it's not here.
and you get like a 3D picture of it, and that's what you print out.
In the cave, we actually scanned the excavations as they happened with a piece of equipment called an Arctec white light 3D scanner. So it's kind of like an egg beater without the beaters, and you kind of sweep it over the area. When we're actually scanning the bones, we have 2 other methods that we use. One is a surface scanner, so you put the bone on a little pedestal turns, and the scanner scans it and registers it, and then you have a 3D shape file. The other thing that we do with all of this material as well is a medical CT scanner and micro CT. So we're using computed tomography scanning as well. and all of the material gets 3D scanned that way too. So that actually penetrates the bone, so you can look at some of the interior features as well. So if you've got teeth, you can look at the cavities or the actual place where the tooth sits in. If you're looking at longer bones, you can actually look at the interior morphology of the bones.
We've just
This is
spoken to a
info.
geophysicist that she was showing us seismic imaging. So they set off earthquake, explosion on the surface of the earth, and it bounced layers. You can tell what the layers are. Would that help you guys at all to find caves, or are you worried about it being destructive?
No, I think so. Ground penetrating radar is something that we have done and probably will do, and part of that was to determine where the rock layers were above the chamber that the fossils were found in, and that was one of the ways that we determined that there hadn't ever been a shaft above the chamber that we excavated out of, and so there had not ever been another access, at least at a certain point into the cave, than what is there now. So yeah, seismic stuff might be very useful. Ground penetrating radar might be helpful in certain contexts. So we'll see. The difficulty with actually getting some of those things right down into the chamber themselves is this wretched 18 centimeter gap. And we couldn't even get survey equipment down there, which is why we resorted to this white light scanner. It's hard enough to get our own selves down there without trying to get equipment in, and Lee is very committed to not damaging the natural features in order to get us in. Mother Nature took a long time to build that, and it wasn't really our right to just go in and chop little edges off so that we can get people in. So, we have the right tools to do the job, so we are the tools, and we'll get in there and do it old school if we need to.
So the caves move and change over time? Do you think that 18 centimeter gap was always like that? Or do you think that there was a possibility of it changing?
Yeah, that 18 centimeter gap, that shaft that I spoke about, the geologists do believe that it has been very stable for a long time. Other parts of the cave do shift. Rocks fall or things, move around in there a little bit. Obviously with things like seismic activity, earthquakes, that kind of thing, it would make a big difference. But even in terms of, I don't know if you've seen stuff like at Sterkfontein where you get a crack in the ground, water and sediments and plants and sometimes dead animals wash into these cracks and then kind of fill them up. Later on, maybe water from below or water seeping in releases that and it collapses. Then something else falls in, and so you get this kind of layering effect of material washing in, then washing out somewhere else. This area, the Cradle of Humankind, has lots of subterranean caverns that may have held rivers at one point. It's been 3 billion years in the making, so there's lots of little nooks and crannies for things to fall into and then erode out of. So it is sort of a cyclic process. But yeah, at this point, our geologists, the geological evidence and our geologists suggest that that particular section of the cave and the chamber itself was always, or has been, stable for a very long time and was stable when the fossils got in there.